Nerpa. Imagine if in elementary school you had to use the ensouled avatar of ChatGPT to fight terrorists who were trying to delete the entire internet. If you've imagined it properly, you're probably seeing something very different, yet strikingly similar to the Megaman Battle Network series. Megaman Battle Network is the first in a series of games that I really loved as a kid, and it's also a game I've never played until now. Playing it has given me a new appreciation for the later entries to the series. There are some things in the game that really work, and some things in the game that really don't work. And I want to talk about it. First, what doesn't work. Megaman Battle Network, being the first in its series, has a lot of issues that the later iterations don't have. The biggest issue, in my opinion, is the winding design of the levels and the frequency of dead ends. If you're exploring a dungeon or the net in general, you're going to often find yourself in places where running around is going to run you into a wall, and with an absurdly high battle encounter rate, you will be feeling that age-old RPG problem with random encounters. There's just too many of them sometimes. Another big issue I have is the visual design of the main net space. The paths are narrow. It's designed to be intentionally confusing, and there aren't really any landmarks to help you orient yourself, which could work to solve the initial problem of the looping, backtrack-heavy design. Speaking of backtracking, that's another big issue. Quests, the main quest, and some of the side quests, although there are very, very few, often are going to have you backtrack from and to areas that you've been. This wouldn't be so much of a problem if not for the fact that, one, it feels terribly unnecessary. I mean, there are often times where you're forced to go out of the net and then back in, essentially forcing you to retread the ground that you walked to get there in the first place. This is something that appears in the later sequels, but it feels like they've gotten a much better handle on what's too much. And for my final criticism, it's the story. I think that the story of the game is incredibly bare bones. Almost nothing is explained, and that's probably due to the fact that this game has a separate series tied to it. But even so, I think that the story that's included is too light. A lot of RPG players, myself included, really do like finding small bits of lore about the world. And the fact that this game doesn't really have that and kind of strips itself of the option of having that is very sad, because that's also a way that I think they could have dampened the effect of that looping level design, because maybe instead of hitting a dead end, you hit a NPC that might give you an interesting bit of information about the world or something like that. That way it won't feel as wasted of a journey as running into a wall feels. Now that we've talked about the criticisms I have, let's move on to what's great about the game. You can't talk about this series without talking about the series' greatest innovation, the battle system. I think that the combat in Megaman Battle Network is incredibly well designed. They really went above and beyond. I don't know what kind of genius came up with this kind of grid movement system, but my goodness is it fun to play. They have a lot of unique enemies that present different challenges, and when those enemies are combined in different ways, the challenge of fighting them changes, and it makes you as the player need to combine your past knowledge of those enemies and come up with an entirely new solution to beat them. For the most part, I will say there are some strong chips you can get that will mostly invalidate weaker enemies. Another big plus is the music for the battles. I think that both exploration and battles, the team has done well with the musical score. My only criticism of the music is the fact there isn't more of it. When you're fighting bosses outside of the final boss, there's only one theme that's the quote-unquote boss theme of the game. I think this is really sad because the dungeons leading up to those bosses do have their own music, but the bosses themselves don't, which is a big missed opportunity, especially in a Mega Man related game, if you ask me. Back to the combat though. In the later iterations of the series, they really take this combat in a whole nother direction and on a whole new level. So playing the first one really gave me some good perspective as to where it came from. An important difference is, it's only in this installment that after every battle, your HP heals back fully. And because of that, they were free to make the enemies harder to deal with. Even if you got out by the skin of your teeth, you'd be back to full health for the next fight, which definitely works in the game's favor, at least in this current design state. The later games change it, but they also change some of the systems around it. Man, the combat is fun though. That's something that I have to say. One of my favorite combat systems, maybe in any RPG I've ever played. It's great for beginners, and in the late game, even for more experienced players, the battles can still feel challenging, especially when one or two wrong moves will set you on a cascade of failures and get you deleted. Now that we've talked about both the negatives and the positives, let's get into, is this game for you? I think that this game lives and dies on how much you like the combat system and the systems around it. If you love the combat system and you can tolerate the level design, this game is absolutely for you. And I wouldn't just recommend it, I would also recommend its successors. However, if you're someone who really wants to have ways to mitigate random encounters, and you don't really much like confusingly designed levels, then I would probably recommend you stay away from, at the very least, this installment. But we'll have a look at the other installments in later videos, so maybe the later ones might suit your fancy a bit better. Now it's time to put it on the ranking list. Since this is the first game that I'm ranking, there's no games to put it above or below, and it is a game that I do enjoy playing, so I'm going to put it at the bottom end of the general order. Every other game that I play is going to be either above or below it. If there's a game that you want me to review and rank somewhere on the list, please leave it in the comments below, and I'd be really happy if you could leave a like and subscribe. Thank you so much, stay around.